So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, our next presenter is Professor Michael Kutzschenbach. He is from the University of Applied Sciences and Arts Northwestern Switzerland. And Michael is a professor of digital management at the Institute of Management at the University of Applied Science and Arts Northwestern Switzerland. His main research interest lies in the interaction of hard and soft feedback systems, thinking especially in the field of organizational learning, as well as business model innovation and entrepreneurship for sustainability in an increasingly digital world. He is actively engaging in teaching MSc, BSc, and MBA level at the University of Applied Sciences and Art Northwestern Switzerland, and he's the founder of Kutzschenbach Institute for Sustainability Study and a member of the System Dynamics Society. And it is over to you, Michael. Please proceed.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Andrew. Hello to everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Michael von Kutzschenbach, and I will take you with me on a somehow thought-provoking keynote. At least that's my intention. Thank you very much for the invitation, Nalini, to provide me the space to do so. As said, I'm the professor for digital management, and I'm very much interested in sustainability. So my question is always, how can system dynamics, system thinking contribute to a more sustainable world, or even to a more sustainable digital world? And I'm quite sure you all know about what's going on right now, the COP27. You might be familiar with the picture on the right, where on the left, sorry, where you see that everything peaks. The same graphic is used in the Earth for All book, where also system dynamics is applied to discuss what is possible. On the other side, we see fantastic development or evolution of digital technologies. And the question is there a possibility that system thinking can contribute to design or proactively engage with better business model innovation for sustainability, and how will this be done? That's a little bit the topic of my talk today. In particular, I'm interested in challenging you a little bit, so it might be a little bit black and white. Bear with me, we can discuss that later then in the discussion round. I would like to start to distinguishing between different types of innovation, because that's my starting point of my journey. So in my point of view, and others too, there are two different types of innovation possible. One is in the more incremental developmental innovation, which leads to change in degree. And on the other side, there might be more disruptive world-making innovation, which leads to change in kind. And to give you a little bit of picture what that could be, I have two different kinds of industries, which from my point of view, very nicely represent the different kinds of change we see. Again, on the left, we see the automotive industry over the last 50 years approximately. And what you see that there is definitely some development here. The car got bigger, contrary to the smartphone maybe, which is getting smaller, but still it's a more incremental development we see in this kind of automotive industry, where we have definitely certain kind of changes happening. Still four wheels, still a steering wheel. We in most cases have still an engine there. Of course, the engine have developed. So we were mostly fuel driven. Now we are maybe E-driven engines. But still, I would say it's mostly around the car and how to improve that, make that better. While on the right side, we see a totally different kind of innovation. What's happened to the music industry. Here we see a change in kind, which I love to call world-making innovation, according to two American colleagues. Ian Kerr and Jason Franco, who are in the Emerging Future Lab, because there a new world appeared. So I'm quite sure the people who are a little bit older like me remember the cassette, and then maybe you got CDs too, like I got, and it developed further. I, as a student, could download music from the internet, and that was just possible because some people researched on MP3 technology, but as research usually is, I think it was a doctor's thesis, it was not of real use, or the people didn't know what the question was to this answer. But at the same time, different trends, changes emerged, and suddenly today we talk about music streaming, Spotify list, or whatever the offering is, and the industry has drastically changed. It is not longer about the recording itself, so the physical entity we or people like me still have at home. It's more about how to stream music to whatever time, whatever place, and maybe even about a smart algorithm to entertain the listener with the latest and most fancy music. And we see a different world have emerged. And the question is, okay, how can this be used? And I think in general, it is not, I would say, in all world-making innovations, so changing kind, it's at a certain point, of course, it will also lead to incremental development and innovation. But maybe the question is at what time, again, it jumps back or gives space to, again, changing kind innovation. And the question here is, how can we build on system dynamics, or how can system dynamics contribute to helping us creating business models for sustainability, or business model innovation for sustainability, which acknowledge that maybe just being better is not the right answer. Maybe we also need to think about what kind of change in kind, what world-making business model innovation for sustainability might be possible and desirable. And that's a little bit where I will dig into. I will have a very brief slide on business model innovation. I'm not quite sure how familiar you are with business model innovation. This is one of the famous canvas where we have these 9 boxes, and on the left side we have value creation, then we have value delivery, which means that you have certain activities which leads to either product, a service which you then deliver to a customer, and there might be different customer, different challenges, and of course then the question is, how do you capture that? And this are usually these 3 building blocks of a business model, and in my understanding, I'm not so close to the pure economic or financial view of business model. I also think a little bit broader, and I would consider it as a story, how the success theory works, how we create, deliver, and capture value within an organization, which can be profit-oriented, but of course can also be less or non-profit oriented. And the question for business model innovation is usually that 2 of the elements has to be changing. That's different to product, service, or process innovation, where you maybe just change, for example, the product. Then we talk about business model innovation. The other thing I think you are quite familiar with, because you had a lot of presentation already yesterday and today early, and you might be familiar, but I thought I'd just give you and not complete list about some system dynamic characteristics which might be important later. Also discuss about what kind of contribution system dynamics may add. So if we think about what contribution can system dynamics offer to business model innovation for sustainability, the question is, what is system dynamics and what might be characteristics? And I like the quote from here, where it said, a system dynamic study is focused around the dynamic hypothesis, the idea that a certain causal structure explains a certain dynamic behavior. So the idea is that we pick whatever kind of dynamic problem usually and try to find explanations why this problem is popping up and how can we improve the situation. And in order to do so, there might be information feedback loops as one of the characteristics where we build on BAS type models. We have delays of stock and flows integrated, and we also include feedbacks. And doing so, we get a model which either can be quantified and simulated, and I saw the presenter before me, he nicely ran a model, came up with different scenarios. This is then possible having a computer simulated dynamic model, but maybe it's also best done in a causal loop diagram where it is more qualitative and the intention is not to model it. And of course, in order to do so, we engage with mental models. And the question is that sufficient for world-making innovations, for getting creativity into the field of business model innovation? Does it allow to also see new things? And I'm not quite sure there. I know that we have a lot of studies supporting business model innovation today. I use the abbreviation BMI here. On the left, you see a paper from Codent where they used the business model canvas and put stock and flow feedback loops in that. And this is also quantified and can simulate, and you can run scenarios. I'm very much a fan of Kim Wern's agile system dynamics approach for living business models, which you see a little bit more on the left. And what I think what we are doing here is either we spot a problem, like it was on the slide before explained. So we have a dynamic hypothesis and we try to elicit the underlying dynamic structure explaining the behavior over time. That is done on the left, or differently done by Kim Wern, who thinks, okay, why does it need to be a problem? Could we not also get the system into the simulation? And then he tries to capture the main characteristics of a business, for example, a business model, and try to model what kind of behavior do we see over time. I think that's cool and good for the question how to improve. So for the change in degree innovation, I think that's good and helpful. I'm not quite sure how much it is of help if we consider change in kind innovation, meaning that we need to have new worlds emerge, or we are even intended, or the intention is world-making innovation. And so the question is then, yeah, is that needed? And I would argue, using Sturman, that sustainability is a very special issue or challenge. I do not really like the word problem here because it puts it so much into the, or it has so much negative emphasis. There's, according to my view, still no one agreed definition on what sustainability is. We could use the Brundtland definition on sustainable development. We could argue that we have SDGs, but all this are usually arguing for that there is a certain state we would like to achieve, either a dynamic equilibrium or maybe even just a checklist which I can take off. But Sturman nicely argued here in this quote that sustainability is the quintessential systems problem, and it is a weekend problem. I would like to stress the two issues here. On the one side, systems problem, and on the other side, weekend problem. So what is interesting, considering sustainability as a systems problem, that would say that I, as an organization or trying to capture a business model, might do an insufficient job because I cannot be sustainable by definition because it is a systems problem. The problem would be much more, how do I contribute to the systems level? And by that, how do I as a business contribute to the world and its problems? And then the question is, how can I as an organization or as a business also proactively engage in making a new world, a new sustainability world, whatever that means. And the other thing is that it is a wicked problem. And the wicked problem was nicely defined by Rittel and Weber, where they said one of the characteristics that a wicked problem is ill-defined problem which has no stopping rule. So the problem with wicked problems is even that it's very challenging to say what is the problem. But as you saw a few slides earlier, that in system dynamics, we are usually very much interested in identifying or defining the problem or the dynamic hypothesis, and then try to contribute to that. And that's, for me, one of the issues where I think we maybe need to move a little bit forward and think how or what could we do different. So that's my main challenge when I use system thinking or system dynamics as a methodology for trying to make business model innovation happening. Then what I'm usually doing is I'm trying to explain what's going on and how can that be improved. But I'm doing that in a somehow given frame. Of course, I'm aware of that usually you try to well define the boundaries, and you may even invite people in order to derive this kind of boundaries, and you decide what's in and out. But still, it is assuming that we are doing that within a given system world. And then the same point is we are looking for causal explanations, and I may have to introduce the picture on the right, which is originally from Donnell Amir. So you maybe have heard about the high leverage points, then was adapted or modified by Abson and colleagues. And this picture is from Fisher, 2021, where they say, look, there are different explanations to a systems change. And systems change, I would say that's very close to what I'm looking for when I'm talking about business model innovation for sustainability. And they realize that on the one side, there is a causal explanation of it, and on the other side, there's a theological explanation of it. And as Donnell Amidus indicated, there seemed to be a hierarchy of leverage points. So according to Donnell Amidus, the leverage power to change something is increasing in the direction of the lever is going up. So meaning that when I have the possibility to redesign or reinvent the intention, then I have a stronger leverage than when I talk about the material or processes. My point is that within the examples, for example, for Cousins, they did a good work, and I'm really appreciating what they did there. It was mostly about describing what's going on, mapping the processes, and maybe also the information flowing around, material flowing around, and the decisions driven by that, creating feedback loops. The question is that sufficient, or is there more needed? And I would argue when we have a systems problem, we need more. And of course, we have also other approaches I'm quite aware of, and most business model endeavor starts with some kind of group model building activity or pet story building model building activity to a clicked element to see. But and that's cool to engage with different mental models, particular when it's about multi-stakeholder decision making in messy contexts, because it helps us to identify the most important problems, and also to include stakeholders which are there, because the problem in messy context is quite often that the people do not know how they affect others by their action and decision to act, and then usually the situation of the system is changed and it's feeding back to them. The mental model building in a participatory approach of course helps a little bit to get a better understanding. That's why I like the elephant picture with the 6 blind people touching at isolated issues, and the idea is to get a better understanding about what's going on, and best case you even get a consensus on that, we agree on, okay, this is the situation and this is happening. But when we click the mental models and we talk about learning, it's usually looking back to what we see here, and the explanation is also building on what we know. And the problem with sustainability, particular when we see what kind of technological disruption we experience, is very unknown. So the question is, how does the new come into the existing world, or how can we systematically and support using the tools and approaches we have to make that happening? And in order to do so, I would once again come back to my leverage point picture and the definition of sustainability. And I would like to stress Ehrenfeld here, who claims that we only can manage unsustainability. So that can be reduced and done better, but still it is doing less bad. So we are doing maybe less unsustainability. The problem of sustainability is different. So here it is that we need to think about how should the world look like, and that's more aspirational. And that's for me the call that may be just defining dynamic hypotheses and then developing the underlying or identifying the underlying systemic structure might be a little bit insufficient, or can be complemented by a different approach. And here I think what in particular when we engage with sustainability, what is important is that we differentiate between the change in degree and the change in kind. So I'm looking for what can we do in order to make more world-making business model innovation for sustainability. And here I think we definitely need to have reflective learning. Oops, sorry. And reflective learning for me is that learning happens when you reflect on experience. But when you do that, usually you need to consider when is this experience happening. And what we currently mostly do is we reflect that within the noun world, the world which is given to us and we accept, which is okay, but maybe needs to be done differently. And the other thing is we may also need to appreciate the messiness of the situation, that we need to think about, linking back to my example in the beginning of the music industry, that maybe even the organizational boundaries will dramatically change. So the question is, how do we get this kind of disruption into our modeling approach? And that's where I think we maybe need also to think about different ways of thinking and acting if the old recipes, which we can nicely describe using system dynamics, are insufficient. And one way to do this might be if we add critical system heuristics to system dynamics, which might complement the causal explanation of system change, because it's very much acknowledging that sustainability is a weakened issue, and also more critically reflecting what do we understand by system and why do we define a system as it is. And here I would ask for maybe critical system heuristics helps us also to see what is not yet there, but might be coming up. Because if we ask people for ideas, so if we want to foster creativity, what they usually do is they look back what they know, and we will get what already exists, maybe slightly modified. But if you really would like to get new ideas, novel ideas, I would say, having a business model, a dynamic model would help us, would provide a good platform, because then we can block what is there. We could block and say, okay, this stock or flow is blocked and we would like to see a different one. Or we could say we would like to see a different feedback loop. And if we do so, we open at least the door for more novel innovation opportunities. And if we then use the potential of what system dynamics provide us, we could explore, okay, how could a business model innovation look like? How could this idea develop? What kind of behavior does this new unknown world see? And from there, we could engage not just in the activity of creating the model, but also in the way of doing, of modeling and learning and reflecting on that experience. And then maybe we have the possibility that a new world will emerge. Why do I think critical systems thinking is interesting? Because I think that's a very unique approach to reflect on why do we see the world as we see it? Because it is usually used as boundary critics. I'm not sure maybe you know about critical systems heuristics because you perceive system thinking as a broader community, and you're aware of that there is system dynamics, systems thinking, like I lost his name, and critical system thinking, making up a broad area of different disciplines. And what I in particular like is that using the critical systems heuristics provide the possibility to check in why different perspectives exist, and are more question oriented than answer oriented. So critical system heuristics invites us to come up with critical questions about why we judge the way we do, providing us the possibility to again engage with what kind of world we have. And usually what you do is you look for how is it and how ought it to be. And by that you get raising awareness about why we see the world as it is, and you open the door, in particular when you start blocking how it is and encourage people to reflect on how it could be different, to see a different kind of world. And usually Ulrich recommends to check that 4 different sources of motivation. One is the motivation, 4 different sources, and one is the motivation source, where he asks for, okay, why is that interesting, or where's the purpose coming from? And when we see the differentiation between change in degree and change in kind, in the car industry, I would claim it is still about improving the car and redefining the purpose. For example, improving mobility would automatically change the boundaries of the system, and the value is coming somewhere else from. And that is, I would say, where also the theological explanation provides support to system dynamics, because sustainability is very value-laden. The same is for power. We are very aware of the source of power usually in system dynamics, because we orient and try to get feedback integrated and decision-making loops. But I would say in order to get in a new world, we may also critically reflect on, is that the right way, and how could it again look different, and what needs to be true to have it like that. The same is true for what kind of information do we have access to, what kind of new information might pop up. And that's in particular of interest when we talk about digitalization, because digitalization is mostly about data and innovation, and hopefully we'll also increase our knowledge base, having more access to that. But definitely we have access to totally different data points, and we can analyze and put that into different kind of knowledge, which provides the possibility again to come up with different kinds of experience, and also maybe different kind of worlds, which is then emerging. And the fourth source of legitimacy is, why do we do that, and why do we have, for example, the license of doing business? And right now, when you, for example, check into the discussion of a circular economy, we're very much aware of that it is still legitimized to have a take, make, use, waste approach, a linear open end where in the end we throw it. And the intention is to close that into a more circular discussion economy. But then the question is, okay, who is interested in making that happen? How is that legitimized? And that again is a very messy, stakeholder-oriented approach. And I would argue that if we add the critical systems heuristic to system dynamic for business model innovation, for sustainability, it would provide us a unique entry point to more critically reflect and maybe not focus so much on the final result, the model, and what we can describe and explain and derive from the model. It would maybe lead us to a more focused view on the modeling and learning itself. By modeling, I mean that we are constantly critically reflecting what we are doing, why we are doing that, how it could be different, and if it could be done different, what would be needed in doing so. And doing that, I think it provides a very nice and strong leverage for breakthroughs for sustainability, because then it would help us to continuously explore what kind of world would we like to see, and how would this world be different. And of course, then again, we could jump in and doing simulations, and we would realize that, for example, these strategic aspirations are very or only loosely coupled to the operational possibilities or capabilities, and that we see that we, for example, need different stocks and flows emerging. And then the question is, how would this be possible? And at the same time, we may also appreciate that existing stocks are decreasing, and it would help us to come up with a different story. And in particular, I would say I'm very thankful that Peter Senge made this nice claim in a presentation in Bergen of the international conference, that there's a clear difference between problem solving and creating sustainability. And he perceived the problem of sustainability as a problem which cannot be solved, but which provides the possibility to learn into a different future, which exactly matches with my interpretation of world-making innovation. So again, there also we need to ask us, how can we better learn into a different future? And the difference to problem solving is that when you are engaged in problem solving, you want to get the problem away, and you try to come up with recommendations how to fix the problem, that it is not popping up again. But if you are creating possibilities for sustainability, you acknowledge that there's still problems, but maybe there's a different world. So for me, the idea is that if we are really interested in world-making business model innovation for sustainability, we need to acknowledge that, of course, we need system dynamics to help us to better explain, describe, understand, and also provide feedback on how we can change an existing system, because there might be certain causal loop, cause and effect relationships. But at the same time, we also need to complement that with a different approach. Here I recommend critical system heuristics to get the normative perspective in, because in the end it is messy and normative, and it is an ongoing process. So we should not just focus on creating a model and explaining the world. We maybe should more focusing on that there is maybe a different world possible, which also might include different problems. This leads me to my recommendations. How can this be done? I would recommend that when you have neglected the underlying dynamic structure, ask yourself more often, how might this be different? Picking a variable, and then you can use critical system heuristics and check in for what is the source of motivation, what is the source of power, what is the source of knowledge or legitimization, and what has to be true if you would like to have a different world, and then maybe a different stock, a different link is needed. This leads me with my ending remark: don't fall in love with your model, keep modeling. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Michael. Very interesting presentation. I'm going to open the floor for questions. I think, Nalini, if you can start it off, you made a comment there in the chat box. Maybe repeat that for us.
Okay, so I was so excited with your presentation, Michael. It was like really resonates very well with me. And so I was making these comments, and then you were getting into the content already, and I was like, wow, okay. So basically, I mean, I was saying we don't do nearly enough reflective learning after we build our models. But also, I mean, the critical system heuristics, we actually need it as a step, a formal step in our modeling process. And usually when we get into systems thinking, and we explain systems thinking using our iceberg model, we usually say there's the events and the patterns of behavior, and then you get to the root cause. And then there should be that step where you have reflective learning, because it doesn't end at just identifying the root causes and getting your leverage points to effect changes in the system. So thank you. That just, yeah, I thought it was excellent, and it's something that we need to actually then apply, and I'm sure we will. We'll go back and definitely amend certain things in our processes. Thank you.
Thank you for your feedback. Highly appreciated.
I see Sandor has also got something in the message box. Sandor, if you want to proceed.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. A very interesting presentation. Yeah, I think we face a dilemma, because one of our critical insights from systems thinking is that structure drives behavior. And this can also be our biggest constraint, because it may limit our thinking of what futures are actually possible. And somehow we have to balance these two and find a way forward. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks you for the comment. I would like to build on that, because I think what we usually do is that we have also a hierarchy on that, particularly when we have, for example, the iceberg, or we say that structure drives behavior. That's usually a one way, or the direction of highest leverage power. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that certain things also drive structure. That's what we see in the digital world. So you suddenly have a technology, and the world around is changing. So you get different structures, and of course these structures again affect the behavior, but that's also feeding back. So I think what we should not, that's why I ended on we should not fall in love with the model. Of course, I know plenty of you who do that, and that's also fine, because you spend energy on that. But I think what of most value is the modeling itself, the doing, the process, and then getting inspired by that. There's where the learning happens. No, of course, your models are great, and we also learn plenty from the models, but don't forget, or just, there might be an idea, a model or a solution, which is good, but there might be a different idea, solution, which might be even better. And then you need to be able to let go of the existing model and enter, or let come a different idea, different model. And that's for me what modeling, when we have a more broader view, makes possible.
Excellent point there. I think you're right. We do fall in love with our models or our diagrams. And it's difficult to start from scratch, but sometimes we have to. Corneille, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Andries. Thank you, Michael, also for the amazing presentation. Actually, my question was regarding that exact point you just talked about, is falling in love with models. I really think it's one of our biggest problems, not just in system dynamics, but it's definitely here. Michael, what advice would you give me to help me not fall in love with my model? Like, how would you help me not fall in love with it?
I think one is the more personal advice and one is maybe more an institutional advice. The personal advice would be put yourself out of your comfort zone, go to arts, improv theater, and see how they perform if they have to jump on different things and get rid of their identity. And I think that's quite often actors can do. They can identify with something different. And I think that's also what design means, being open. Theory U, for example, explains that in the process of downloading and uploading, also getting aware of who are you and what else might be possible. The institutional is, I think, what is one of the main challenges according to my view. I mean, you may have a different view on that, but we are living in a bubble, and we are proud of what we do, and we get the feedback from our colleagues. That's cool. If you go out and see what others do, and they think, for example, I still see a big gap between system dynamics as a pure discipline and the design thinking approach and community, and that's very challenging to get these two together and appreciating both sides and also acknowledging that they contribute both to things. I would say the design thinking is more practitioner oriented and more easy to digest for business, while system dynamics is a heavy load on usually intellectual equation hacking activities. But challenge, or if you can get better, so I have not a clear career path. So I started as environmental scientist, moved into IT, and I'm now more into the diverse field of innovation. There is no clear discipline I'm belonging to, which has a lot of issues, because I have big problems to sell my work, because the majority is asking for a solution, not a different question to the problem. So that's not well appreciated. And the other say, where do you come from? Are you a strategic management person? Are you an operational project management person? Are you IT? Are you art and design? And I sometimes say I'm everything but nothing. I'm a generalist. And I just want to help you to get more empowered. And I feel like education is still lacking a little bit supporting that, because we are there usually put all things in silos. I think you experience that being a system dynamic person, that is sometimes already a challenge. But that's where I would say we also need to get better on the institutional level, appreciating that there's a messy context, or there are ill-defined problems, and there's no technical routine answer possible.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think excellent advice, because, you know, we also sometimes just have to appreciate that we as system dynamicists are not necessarily the domain experts. And it's always the right thing to start with the domain experts to explain how they understand their system, then simulate, but take it back to them and say, are you in agreement that I understand what you think you understand of your system sufficiently well? And maybe they say, no, you have no clue, you got it wrong, and you start again. I think it's very difficult for the ego to do that, but sometimes that's what we have to do. That's the only way to break the love. But the key is keep the model in the background. You can run it for yourself because you know you're right, and you run the proper model for the client. So
and
yeah,
that's where learning happens, Andres, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, when you see, and that's why for me the counterintuitive part of the model is the valuable, because then you have to go and with the domain expert try and understand why is the model that used to behave properly suddenly doing strange things. How do you explain that? And absolutely, that's where the most valuable learning takes place. We've got 2 more minutes. I don't know if there's any other questions. Anybody with a comment? If nobody, thank you very much, Michael. Really insightful, and I think a bunch of us learned a lot out of this, and we'll take it forward. And as Kurnay says, try and fall out of love with those pretty models that our clients say is not 100% what they should be. Thank you very much
for having me. Wish you continuous great chapter meeting. See you hopefully soon again.
Bye-bye, Michael.
Bye.